What is economics? Welcome to Philosopher's Corner. I'm John. What is economics? Standard definition of economics is the social science dealing with production and consumption and trade of goods and services. Also, the theory of the management of micro and macro economics. So, one of the first people to really start diving into economics was Aristotle. And when he was talking about it, he was discussing it as the management of a household. So right now we can then see that economics is a lens that we can put on any system of the consumption and production of goods and services. And in the timeline, if we go back to right before we come into civilization and we're hunter-gatherers, even within the tribes, there are economies. And philosophically, we can determine that these economies essentially are human interaction and ways to survive, ways to produce food, ways to get food, way to give food to other people in exchange for skills that they have. And those skills can be tangible or intangible. They can be leadership skills, they can be production of tools, they can be all sorts of things. They can literally be anything deemed valuable. So as we moved into civilization and people became aware and conscious that these systems existed, then they became open to being codified and they became open to management and theory, which is what most people think about when you think about economics. They're thinking about the different theories and the different systems that get ran, but rarely are they just thinking about it in a broader sense. So in the broader sense, especially when we get to a point where money is introduced, because remember, for a long time, money as we know it in terms of paper currency or digital currency or credits and systems, those didn't necessarily emerge for a long time. Now, dating back to antiquity, you have precious metals pressed into coins that were circulated as circulating currency. But in terms of the modern economy, where we created a credit system and we have all these other different abstract ways to codify the economy, those didn't emerge so much later. So for a long time, humanity had been operating with economies that were less abstract in nature. Now, when people became aware of the fact that economies existed and that trading goods and services and how production in that scenario fueled it and how wealth could be accrued or wealth could be managed at different levels, harkening back to Aristotle thinking that it was just household management. Well, the household, people figured out that you can make the household a much bigger concept and that it could encompass a business, it could encompass a corporation, it encompass an entire nation or blocks of nations. And some people even think an entire planet, and who knows, beyond. When we make contact with other planets, galactic economies emerge. No matter what level of economy we look at it, really what we're seeing is, because when you get to those points, people also bring their morality into it. And then, as we know, when you have a set of morality, it becomes ethics. And so very quickly, an economy goes from just a seemingly benign set of interactions to the tangible manifestation of human interaction. And that includes the whole person. So then all of a sudden, we're saying that it's the production and consumption and trade of goods and services, but really what we're getting into is just broad human interaction and interaction between people in every conceivable way, person to person, person to group, group to group, group to person, and then any other way that you can imagine it. Massive groups, small groups, ideological groups, any way that they can be thought of, they can interact. And any way that they can interact can be brought under the guise of economy. Now from there, of course, there's all the different theories of systems that we're familiar with, ranging, from capitalism, socialism, communism, kind of the same thing, whatever. There's all these different economic systems that you can get into. And, in the modern world, the emergence of digital currencies like Bitcoin are proposing, new theories of how the laws of economies should work. And they build it into their technology, right? So there's all these different theories of ways the economies can work, and there are different ways economies can work. Economies, of course, are separate from political systems. Now, there are areas of economics that discuss political economics as its own focus. We're not going to get too that much into that here because we're just talking about economics in a broad sense. But there is an area of study that focuses on political economics, because economics end up being a very powerful, very tangible form of human interaction in the broadest sense possible. Things we don't think of can, of course, add value to economies. And economies just become a broad way to describe all human interaction in the material world. So, microeconomics, just lower level, individuals, people interacting. Macroeconomics, much larger. You can debate like what level it becomes macro. Is it the city, is it county, city, state, provincial, territorial, national? And you end up dealing with different policies, because when you get to certain levels of the economy, whereas maybe like in microeconomies, the people are more concerned with short-term living when wealth is accrued and factors change and the level of the group changes, and you find yourself studying corporations. Well, corporations are, they're concerned with long-term existence, and they're not concerned necessarily with survival. They're concerned with all sorts of other value systems that typically individuals don't share. So even right there, there's sort of a bifurcation between the value systems of microeconomics, which is what most people live with, and macroeconomics, which is at higher aggregate levels of the economy. And when you study it, you see that a lot of the friction in the world comes from really individuals existing in microeconomic world, but being subject to the power plays of macroeconomic world. Speaking of which, and so that, and once again, that comes under the study of economics in general. How is it that people in microeconomic world are being subject to the laws and momentum and inertia and the forces of macroeconomic world? When a lot of times they're the aggregates of it, and a lot of people, obviously, that causes a lot of tension. For instance, for example, with the people in their government, because ostensibly the government is nothing more than the aggregate, economically, the aggregate of its individual citizens. And a lot of times individual citizens say, well, you're creating this macro economy off of us, and you're not actually doing what we want, and you're actually doing policies that are in direct opposition to my well-being. So it's interesting. So economics just in general. It's the social science that deals with production and consumption of goods and services and the trade of retail goods and services. And it's a powerful subject for people because it affects everybody's lives. But I think at the end of the day, it's really the tangible manifestation of human interaction. Well, I hope you found this helpful. Thanks for spending some time here at Philosopher's Corner, and I hope you have fun.